Arnold Schwarzenegger was alone in the prison weight room when a 300-pound inmate walked in, looked him dead in the eyes, and said, "These weights are mine now." What that inmate did not know was that the man standing in front of him had been building his body since he was 15 years old, and he had never once walked away from a challenge in his life. This is the story nobody told. If you are new here, subscribe. We drop these every single day. It was a Tuesday afternoon inside the Indiana State Correctional Facility, the kind of afternoon where the air inside the walls felt thick and heavy, where the noise of the cell blocks faded into a low hum and most inmates were either sleeping, playing cards, or keeping their heads down. The weight room was one of the few places in that facility where a man could be alone with his thoughts. 4 walls of concrete, a few benches bolted to the floor, a rack of iron plates that had been touched by hundreds of men over the years, no windows, 1 door, a single overhead light that flickered every time the ventilation system kicked on. Arnold Schwarzenegger had been inside for several months by this point. He was not the man the public had known on the outside. No cameras, no crowds, no applause. Just a number on a uniform and a schedule that told him when to eat, when to sleep, and when he was allowed to move. But the one thing that had not changed, the one thing that had kept him grounded since he was a teenager in Austria lifting weights in a cold gymnasium with nothing but ambition and iron, was his commitment to his body. Every single day, without exception, Arnold was in that weight room, not to impress anyone, not to send a message, simply because it was the only place inside those walls where he still felt like himself. That Tuesday, he had been working for nearly 40 minutes. Methodical, focused, deliberate. The way he had always trained. Not reckless, not explosive for the sake of it, but controlled and precise. He moved through each set with the kind of quiet intensity that people who had never trained seriously could not fully understand. To someone watching from the doorway, it might have looked easy. To anyone who actually knew what they were seeing, it was something else entirely. That is when the door opened. The man who walked in went by the name of Doyle. He was 34 years old and had been inside the facility for 6 years. He stood 6 feet and 3 inches tall and weighed somewhere close to 300 pounds. Not soft weight. Hard, compacted, built through years of the same prison routine that had shaped every serious inmate in that block. His arms were thick from the elbows up, his neck was wide, and the way he carried himself through a room made other men instinctively step aside without being asked. Doyle had a reputation inside that facility that had been established long before Arnold arrived. He did not share equipment. He did not wait his turn. And he had never, not once in 6 years, been told no by anyone inside those walls. He walked past the door, let it swing shut behind him, and stood still for a moment. He looked at the bench Arnold was using. He looked at the plates loaded on the bar. Then he looked at Arnold directly and said, without any particular anger, almost casually, as if he were simply stating a fact that had always been true, "These weights are mine now." Arnold set the bar back onto the rack slowly. He did not jump up. He did not raise his voice. He sat up straight on the bench, placed both hands on his knees, and looked at Doyle for a long moment without saying a word. The overhead light flickered once. Outside in the corridor, a few inmates had noticed Doyle walking toward the weight room. Word moved fast inside a facility like that. By the time the door had closed behind Doyle, there were already men positioning themselves near the small, rectangular window set into the wall beside the entrance. Not pushing, not shouting, just watching. The way inmates always watched when something worth seeing was about to happen. Arnold finally spoke. His voice was calm. Not the calm of someone who was afraid and hiding it. The calm of someone who had simply decided, long ago, that panic was a waste of energy. He said, "I have been using this equipment for the past 40 minutes. I will be finished when I am finished." Doyle did not move. He tilted his head slightly to one side, the way a man does when he has heard something unexpected and is deciding how to respond. He had not been spoken to like that inside this facility, not once. He took 2 steps forward, closing the distance between them, and crossed his arms across his chest. The message was clear without a single additional word needing to be said. The men watching through the window had gone completely still. Arnold stood up from the bench, not fast, not slow, just stood the way a man stands when he has made a decision and the decision is final. He was not as tall as Doyle. He did not need to be. The years of training, the discipline, the sheer physical presence that came from decades of understanding exactly what his body was capable of. All of it was visible in that single moment of him simply rising to his feet. Doyle, for the first time in a very long time, felt something shift in the room that he could not immediately explain. Arnold looked at him and said, "I respect that you run things in this facility. I have no interest in taking anything from you, but I will finish my workout, and when I am done, you are welcome to every piece of equipment in this room." Doyle stared at him. The silence stretched long enough that 2 of the men watching from outside exchanged a glance. Then something unexpected happened. Doyle uncrossed his arms. He looked at the bar loaded on the bench. He looked at Arnold. And for the first time in longer than he could remember, he laughed. Not mockingly, not the laugh of a man who had won something. The laugh of a man who had just seen something he genuinely had not expected to see. He pulled a bench from against the wall, sat down on it, and waited. Arnold turned back to the rack, wrapped his hands around the bar, and finished his set. Nobody said another word. The men outside the window slowly drifted away, and when Arnold finally racked the bar for the last time and stepped back, he nodded once at Doyle, picked up his towel, and walked to the door. Before he pushed it open, Doyle spoke again. He said, "You are either the smartest man in this facility or the craziest one." Arnold looked back at him and said, "In my experience, there is not much difference between the two." He walked out. The door swung shut behind him. By dinner that evening, every inmate in that cell block had heard some version of what happened in the weight room. The story changed with each telling, the way stories always do inside places like that. But the part that never changed, the part that every single person who had been watching through that window agreed on, was this: Arnold Schwarzenegger had been told that something was not his, and he had stood his ground, kept his composure, and walked out of that room on his own terms, without throwing a single punch, without raising his voice above a conversational tone, without showing even a flicker of the fear that Doyle had spent 6 years making other men feel. That was the day the weight room became neutral ground. What happened in that weight room on a Tuesday afternoon was never written down in any official report. No guard filed an incident form. No counselor made a note in any file. As far as the facility was concerned, nothing had occurred. But inside those walls, in the currency that actually mattered, something had shifted permanently. Doyle continued to run the cell block the way he always had. But from that day forward, whenever Arnold walked into the weight room, the equipment was available. No words exchanged, no negotiation required. Just a silent agreement between 2 men who had each seen something in the other worth respecting. Arnold would later reflect that the lessons he had learned in gymnasiums as a teenager had served him in places he never could have imagined. Discipline, he believed, was not something you left at the door when circumstances changed. It was the one thing that traveled with you everywhere. Into competition, into politics, into the most difficult rooms you would ever find yourself standing in. Real strength, he had always said, was not about how much weight you could move. It was about knowing exactly who you were when everything else had been stripped away. If this story stayed with you, hit that subscribe button right now, because we release a brand new Arnold Schwarzenegger story every single day. Every video is a story the headlines never covered. The moments that happened behind closed doors, inside rooms with no cameras, in front of people who were never supposed to talk. These are the stories that reveal who a man actually is when the world is not watching. Leave a comment below and tell us. What would you have done in that weight room? Would you have stood your ground or would you have walked away? Drop your answer below. We read every single one. And if you want to see the next chapter of what happened to Arnold inside that facility, make sure you are subscribed and the notification bell is turned on. The next story is already waiting for you.